Hello, YouTube. Let us look at some very interesting archaeological riddles from the relatively new discoveries around the globe. And let us start in Egypt. Egyptian pyramids. It would seem that they have been studied far and wide, and there is basically nothing to discover anymore. But that's not the case. Recently, archaeologists have studied in detail the stepped pyramid in Saqqara, which is 30 kilometers from Cairo. Usually, tourists who come to look at the Egyptian pyramids, they do not pay close attention to Saqqara. Among the structures there, this pyramid is the smallest. Although it is the oldest too, it was erected at the beginning of the 28th century BC as the tomb of Pharaoh Djoser. So, exploring the vicinity of the pyramid, Egyptologists found several previously unknown burials, and in one of them, a perfectly preserved mummy. Judging by the inscriptions in the burial crypt, the tomb belongs to a high-ranking royal official named Knumjedev. This man lived about 4,500 years ago, and this was under Pharaoh Uzzah, the last king of the 5th dynasty. He was considered to be the chief court priest. But an even bigger surprise awaited the archaeologists at the depth of 15 meters at the bottom of one of the burial shafts. In there, researchers found a perfectly preserved limestone sarcophagus containing the mummy of a man named Gekashepes. The body of the deceased is covered with gold leaf. Obviously, it was a very influential court grandee or courtier or official. But the most important thing is that this mummy is by far the most ancient and well-preserved of all that have been discovered in ancient Egyptian graves. Scientists dated to the 24th century BC, which means that it is almost 4,500 years old. The value of the find for science is as follows. Everyone is well aware of the importance attached to the burial of the deceased in ancient Egypt. They were carefully preparing for the afterlife. A burial chamber was built in the depths of the mine. A sarcophagus was placed there. Household items and figurines with images of the owner of the tomb were placed around. Then a pyramid was built over this place, or a mound of stones was erected. Of course, the more noble a person was, the more impressive in size and decoration was his tomb. The body of the deceased himself was subjected to mummification. Moreover, in this case, the ancient Egyptians reached unprecedented heights. Until now, modern science, with all its might, is not able to accurately recreate the entire process of turning the body of the deceased into a mummy, which can remain incorruptible for centuries. Only the first stage of mummification is more or less known: thorough extraction of the entrails and drying of the body in the sun. But further operations are still unknown for sure. We only know from later descriptions that sometimes the process of mummification could last several months. Moreover, various anatomical operations carried out, by the way, at the highest surgical level, were accompanied by prayers and all kinds of rituals. Of course, each stage of this long process was led by specially trained people. All the details of the mummification were kept in the strictest secrecy. Only a narrow circle of initiates knew about them. It is also known that the heyday of mummification occurred during the New Kingdom, that is, during the period from the 15th to the 13th century BC. It was during this period that most of those mummies that have survived to the present day were made. Whether this was done in Egypt before and when the first mummies appeared at all, modern Egyptologists do not know for sure. Therefore, the recent discovery in Saqqara, which is 1,000 years older than the previous ones, is of great interest to science. Perhaps studying it will allow us to make a lot of amazing discoveries. Now, Egyptologists all over the world are carefully studying the discovered burials, and the Egyptian authorities apparently hope that these unique finds will restore the tourist flow, which has significantly thinned in recent years. And I would suggest to the Egyptian authorities to allow the archaeologists, seasoned, well-known archaeologists, to continue their search for new discoveries and not to limit their work. But I will leave it at that, and in the future I will come to very interesting discoveries that were made over 100 years ago in Egypt, but not being talked about. But now let's look at ancient Siberia. The ancient people who inhabited Siberia believed in dragons. Even their images have been preserved. Andrei Borodovsky, an employee of the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography of the Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences, himself Doctor of Historical Sciences, suggested that the ancient Chinese could have borrowed the image of a fantastic creature, the dragon, from the Siberians. This hypothesis came by after the scientists compared the canonical images of the snake-like deities from Chinese mythology with the bronze cast dragons found in Khakassia. It's in Russian Asia. Now, in Asian mythology, dragons were not monsters. On the contrary, they symbolized the good beginning and the power of the emperor. Ideas about dragons began to form among the tribes inhabiting Asia, including southern and eastern Siberia, presumably in the Neolithic era. There was a union of warlike tribes, the Xiongnu, and they were making successful raids on China. By that time, the Huns were already in full possession in the south of Siberia, in Transbaikal region, and on the territory of modern Mongolia. Both cultures had a strong influence on each other. Andrei Borodovsky compared images of traditional Chinese dragons and bronze dragons dating back to the 1st century BC, which were accidentally found on a state farm in Khakassia, while peasants were plowing a field. The dragon found in Khakassia is depicted as an attacking snake. I was surprised how realistic it looks after 2,000 years. Ancient artists did not depict according to the principle of I see it this way. They were very observant and conveyed the dynamics of the movement of the real animal, said Andrei Borodovsky. In Khakassia, plates depicting the creature were found in a large cauldron along with other metal objects, presumably for ritual purposes. The dragons were attached to leather straps. Radiocarbon analysis showed that the contents of the cauldron were manufactured between the 1st century BC and the 1st century AD. Most likely they were buried by one of the ancient priests or shamans. So what is common and what are differences between the Chinese and the Khakas dragon? On those plates, the dragon is depicted in the form of a spiral. It has the head of a hoofed animal, large eyes, long pointed ears, saber-shaped horns and whiskers, as well as a snake body, bird paws, and a tail with spikes. The Chinese one also had a snake-like body, horns, and tail. The Chinese could have borrowed just this signs or traits from the people of Siberia to the Xiongnu, according to Borodovsky. Now, the Chinese dragon continued to evolve, and by the Middle Ages acquired scales, paws, became more cat-like. Also the creature learned to fly. In China, the dragon has been depicted as a zigzag from ancient times to this day. Also in Chinese mythology, the number of claws on the dragon matters. The more of them, the higher the status of the dragon itself and the person who wears its image. Modern Chinese consider the dragon a symbol of their nation and are convinced that their dragon was copied by other nations. Well, the Russian scientist assumes that this is not the case. Plaques with the images of dragons were found in the territory of the Krasnoyarsk territory, Siberia. A small number were found in the Omsk region. Southern Siberia was a transit territory, and the scientist does not rule out that local ideas about how a dragon might look sprang among other peoples. Well, Andrei Borodovsky, this researcher, said that there were many creatures in Siberian myth-making, including the chimeras, multi-headed fire-breathing monsters consisting of parts of different animals. They had features similar to the Greek chimeras and their own unique features. Fantastic creatures, of course, existed in the myths of inhabitants of the Ural Mountains, the European part of Russia. And I've told you about those strange snakes and what people believed them to be and what they had observed. You can see it in my videos. It would be interesting to see an encyclopedia of mythical creatures with geolocation on the map from far east to the Crimea. Andrei Borodovsky did not rule out that such a publication might appear, so let's look forward to it. In the meantime, Siberian dragons can be seen at the exhibition at the museum of the Institute in the academic scientific town in Russia. Now, here's another great mystery of the 20th century, so to say, well, at least in one part of the world. And I've talked about it in my other videos, and I will attach a link to it. Where this so-called Kolchak gold go to? For many years, enthusiasts have been trying to find an answer to this question, and I'm sure gold diggers as well. But so far, they have not come to a consensus of opinions. It is known that Admiral Alexander Kolchak, who proclaimed himself to be the supreme ruler of Russia and was fighting the communists, had at his disposal half of the gold reserves of the Russian Empire, more than 651 million rubles, gold rubles. This colossal sum at that time was seized in 1918 in the city of Kazan by the rebellious Czechoslovak Corps who were interned in Russia because of World War I, and then transferred to Admiral Kolchak. After the defeat of the Kolchak army in the early 1920s, a significant part of the gold disappeared without a trace. Since then, there have been heated debates on this topic. Some believe that the Kolchak himself hid the gold somewhere in the caves of the Sikhote-Alin mountain range. And those who had seen my video about the strange celestial body that fell there in 1947 will remember in great detail this mountain range. Other people believe that Russian gold has safely migrated abroad. Still others are sure that Kolchak and his government spent a significant part of the gold reserves of the Russian Empire on the purchase of weapons and ammunition. And these are just the most convincing hypotheses, but there are more. Well, so happened that in 2015, while studying the materials of the city archives, Irkutsk, that's in Siberia, archaeologists came across several sheets left over from the notebook of General Andrei Bakich, Kolchak's closest associate. These sheets clearly indicate the location of the wagon train, which contained part of the notorious Kolchak gold. Judging by the records, the train rests at the bottom of one of the deep water lakes of the Chemalsky district of the Altai territory. Well, looks like a small matter to lift, to get the gold from the depth of several dozens of meters. But who and when will undertake this extremely difficult and expensive enterprise? The question is left open. The Russians will not let foreigners come there to try their luck, and those who will try their luck, might not leave the area of the lakes. And it's curious that this information has come up again. It's a fascinating subject. If you look at the phenomena of lost treasures, so to say, there's quite many of them in the former Soviet Union, and I've spoken about some of them. I know some people like this subject, so I bring it up once in a while. And in the future, I'll tell you more interesting archaeological discoveries from a few places in the world that really interest me. Southern Africa, former Soviet Union, Eurasia, and I'll promise to bring you the most interesting stories. If you like my research, please support me. You'll find the links on how to do it in the description to this video. Please tell others about my channel, and please like my videos. Thank you.